Helike, the real-life Atlantis of ancient Greece. The dogs were the first to know. 5 days before the end, the animals of Helike, dogs, weasels, snakes, even beetles, began to flee. They abandoned the city in a mass exodus, heading for the hills. The humans watched them go, confused, but they stayed. They shouldn't have. On a winter night in 373 BC, the ground didn't just shake, it turned to liquid. The entire city, its temples, its statues of Poseidon, and its thousands of sleeping citizens, sank vertically into the earth. Moments later, a black wall of water from the Corinthian Gulf roared in to finish the job. When the sun rose, there was no city. Only a calm, empty sea. For 2,000 years we looked for them in the water. We were wrong. The city wasn't lost, it was waiting. And now we have finally found the real Atlantis. Intro. Welcome to the hunt for Helike. If you think Atlantis is just a fairy tale, think again. Plato wrote the story of Atlantis just a few decades after Helike was destroyed. The parallels are impossible to ignore. A wealthy city, a center of Poseidon worship, destroyed by water and earth in a single day and night of misfortune. This was the premier city of Achaea, a superpower of the ancient world. But for centuries, it was the greatest ghost story of archaeology. Where did it go? How does a major metropolis vanish without a trace? The answer involves a detective story that spans millennia and a geological trick that fooled the world's best scientists. Today we are digging into the mud to reveal the wrath of Poseidon. The discovery of Helike is one of the greatest triumphs of modern science, correcting a 2,000-year-old mistake. If you love seeing myths become reality, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Adventure Hidden because we are about to bring a dead city back to life. Chapter 1: The City of the Earthshaker. To understand why Helike fell, you have to understand who they worshipped. This was the city of Poseidon Helikonios. The hubris of Helike. Helike wasn't just a city, it was the religious capital of the Achaean League. It was famous for its massive temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes. The coinage. Their coins featured the head of Poseidon on one side and his trident on the other. They built their wealth on trade, their ships dominating the Corinthian Gulf. The crime. Ancient historians like Pausanias tell us that shortly before the disaster, suppliants, people seeking refuge, were dragged from the altar of Poseidon and murdered by the Helikians. In the eyes of the Greeks, this was the ultimate sin, hubris. They had defiled the sanctuary of the Earthshaker. The setup. The city sat on a fertile plain near the delta of 3 rivers. It was a beautiful, dangerous location. They thought their god protected them. They forgot that Poseidon's other name was Enosikthon, the Earthshaker. The cliffhanger, the anger of the god, or the pressure of the tectonic plates, was building. The animals sensed the vibrations days in advance and fled. The humans, blinded by their arrogance and security, went to sleep on that winter night, unaware that the ground beneath them was about to change state. Chapter 2: The Night the Earth Turned to Water. We often think of earthquakes as shaking. But what happened at Helike was far more terrifying. It is a phenomenon called soil liquefaction. The event, 373 BC in the dead of night, a massive earthquake, estimated magnitude 7+, struck. Because Helike was built on water-saturated sediment, the violent shaking caused the soil to lose its strength and behave like a liquid. The sinking, the foundations of the houses, the walls, and the temples didn't just topple, they sank. The city literally dropped below sea level in minutes. The tsunami. Before the survivors could scramble out of the mud, the earthquake triggered a submarine landslide in the Gulf. A massive tsunami rushed inland, covering the sunken city in deep water. The aftermath. The next morning, rescue parties came from nearby cities. They found nothing to save. The tops of the trees were just visible above the water. The city was gone. Over 2,000 Spartan soldiers who were anchored in the harbor were also vanished, their ships dragged down with the city. The cliffhanger. For centuries, Roman tourists would sail over the spot and peer down into the clear water, claiming to see the ruins of the statue of Poseidon standing on the seabed. But then, slowly, the city disappeared again. When modern archaeologists came looking in the 20th century, the seabed was empty. Where did the ruins go? Chapter 3: The Search for the Invisible City. Finding Helike became the obsession of archaeologists. It was the Holy Grail. Everyone assumed it was underwater. The failed expeditions. 1950s to 1980s. Numerous teams, including the famous sonar pioneer Harold Edgerton, searched the floor of the Corinthian Gulf. They used side-scan sonar, sub-bottom profilers, and divers. The result? Zero. They found shipwrecks, but no city. No walls, no columns, no statues. Skeptics began to argue that Helike was a myth, or that the ruins had been scattered into nothingness by the sea. The mystery, how could a city described by Plato, Strabo, and Pausanias simply cease to exist? The Roman tourists saw it. Why couldn't we? The shift. Enter Dora Katsanopoulos, a Greek archaeologist who grew up in the region. She teamed up with Stephen Soter, a physicist. They had a radical theory. They looked at the geology, not the sea. The theory, they realized that the rivers around Helike had been dumping silt into the bay for 2,300 years. The coastline had moved. The lagoon where Helike sank had slowly filled up with mud and dirt, turning into solid land. The conclusion, Helike wasn't underwater anymore. It was underground, buried beneath the vineyards and orchards of the modern plain. Chapter 4. The Discovery, Digging in the Wrong Place? This theory was controversial. Imagine telling people, don't look in the sea for the sunken city, dig in that lemon grove. The drill cores, 1991 to 2000, the team began drilling boreholes in the plain. The clues, they started finding ceramic fragments, marine shells and brackish water microorganisms deep underground, proof that this dry land was once a lagoon. The eureka moment, 2001. After a decade of searching, they finally hit the jackpot. In a trench near the village of Rizamalos, about 10 feet down, they uncovered ancient walls. The proof, they weren't just walls. They found coins, silver coins stamped with the face of Poseidon. Pottery, classic Greek pottery dating exactly to the 4th century BC. The destruction layer, a thick layer of marine clay and chaotic debris covering the ruins, the unmistakable signature of a tsunami. The cliffhanger, they had found Helike. But as they dug deeper, they realized the site was even more complex than they imagined. Helike wasn't the first city to be destroyed there. The curse of Poseidon had struck this exact spot before. Chapter 5. The Layers of Destruction. The excavation revealed a chilling history of violence. Helike wasn't a one-time event, it was a target. The Bronze Age city. Beneath the classical city of 373 BC, the archaeologists found an even older city from the early Bronze Age, 2400 BC. This city too had been destroyed by an earthquake and fire. It seems the region was a geological trap, destined to destroy whatever civilization built there. The Roman road. Above the ruined city they found a Roman road. This proved that centuries later, after the lagoon had silted up, the Romans walked right over the top of the lost Greek Atlantis, completely unaware that the legendary city lay just a few meters beneath their sandals. The state of preservation. Because the city was buried instantly in soft mud, the preservation is incredible. Organic matter. They have found preserved seeds, wood, and even woven fabrics that usually rot away. Standing walls. Unlike other ruins that are robbed for stone over centuries, Helike was sealed. The walls are standing exactly as they were the moment the water hit. Chapter 6. The Atlantis Connection, Solving the Myth. So, is Helike the real Atlantis? The evidence is overwhelming. The timeline. Plato wrote his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, where Atlantis is described, around 360 BC, just 13 years after Helike was destroyed. The disaster would have been fresh in his mind. The details. Plato describes Atlantis as a wealthy city, connected to the sea, destroyed by earthquakes and floods in a single day and night. This is an exact description of the fate of Helike. The moral. Plato used Atlantis as a moral warning against hubris. Helike, the city that defied the gods and murdered suppliants, was the perfect real-world example for his philosophical story. The final verdict. While Atlantis may be a fictional story constructed by Plato, the inspiration for its destruction was almost certainly the tragedy of Helike. The lost continent wasn't in the Atlantic Ocean, it was right there in the Gulf of Corinth. Finding Helike proves that the greatest myths often have roots in terrifying reality. It also reminds us that the earth beneath our feet is not as solid as we think. Do you think there are other Atlantises waiting to be found under our modern cities? Let us know in the comments. Chapter 7. The Legacy of the Earthshaker. Today the excavations at Helike continue. Every summer more of the city emerges from the mud. It is a slow, difficult process, fighting against the high water table that tries to drown the city all over again. Helike is a time capsule. It captures a moment of supreme terror and everyday life, frozen in 373 BC. It tells us about the power of nature and the fragility of human ambition. The city of Poseidon has returned to the world of the living. It wasn't magic and it wasn't aliens. It was science, persistence, and the willingness to look where no one else was looking that finally solved the mystery. Otro. The next time you walk through a vineyard or an orchard near the sea, take a moment to wonder what lies beneath. Helike taught us that history isn't always written in stone. Sometimes it's buried in mud, waiting for the right person to ask the right question. If the resurrection of the real Atlantis fascinated you, please like this video and share it with your fellow history hunters. And for more thrilling journeys into the world's most incredible lost cities, make sure you are subscribed to Adventure Hidden. Until our next expedition, keep digging and stay curious.